What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tattoo Critiques. Once again, welcome back, and thank you so much for joining me. This week is all about apprentices, so let's break them down and find out if there's anything I can do to help out along their journey. Before we get into it, if you could please hit that subscribe button, as it is the best way to support the channel. But let's check out this first one sent in by Mads. Now, Mads is a one-year apprentice, and they've been on skin for about 4 months, and they sent over this black and gray suited guy with a gramophone for a head. He's also got no feet. I guess he can't dance to his own tunes. I'm also not sure how he's reading that book. Maybe audiobooks are a better choice for him? I know I'm reading into it too much. Let's talk about this tattoo. But my first impressions are, I do appreciate all the values that this tattoo has. Although they're not the smoothest, you can clearly tell what everything is. I would like to see more line work in this tattoo, especially around the shoulders and the gramophone itself. And that's not saying that you have to have big bold lines, but more so like the lines around the bottom right of the pants. Something that's just there. You can always shade away from those lines, but you need some kind of structure so it doesn't fade away over time. And that's something I see a lot of in newer black and gray realism tattooers. It just feels like they're not confident putting those lines in there. But after they see these tattoos in about 10 years, they're really gonna wish those lines were there. The shading's not bad by any means. They are all in the right place. It just feels, I don't know. Again, I see this a lot with newer tattooers. It almost feels like they're coming from pencil drawings. Maybe they're not being as delicate with it as they should be, or maybe their machine is running too hard. Because it just feels like accidental stipple shading. Like if we look up to that gramophone up top, those shades in the gramophone, the metallic parts, should be very smooth. And I know you've only been tattooing for 4 months, so maybe that's something you haven't learned yet. Me personally, I would not only make the shades in the horn a lot more smooth, but the same could be said for the hand as well. Because these are all different objects and materials, so you want to make sure that they're all discernible. And the book itself just seems a bit too plain. I know there's some nice contrast happening in between the book and the suit, but it just feels unfinished. And going back to the gramophone, I know I generally tell people to be reserved when it comes to using white, but this is one of those areas where I would have went a little bit crazier with it, because I usually save the whites for areas that are shiny, wet, or metallic. And this is definitely one of those. I also would like to see those black areas a lot more black in the gramophone, because I know you know how to pack it. I can see it in the hole of the pant leg and in his lap. Again, it would have just gave it a really nice contrast and made it look reflective. But for being on skin for only 4 months, you're doing pretty good. I would suggest just trying to be a lot more confident when it comes to your outlines, and maybe possibly try moving your hand a lot slower to get some of those smoother shades. But thank you so much, Mads, for sending that over. All right, the next tattoo is from 0x, and 0, you sent over a master sword from the video game Zelda. And 0, I think if Link had to use this sword, he'd be awfully pissed, because I don't know if he's going to be doing a lot of damage with this thing. You did mention in your email that you've been apprenticing for 2 years, which I kind of find surprising, because usually when I see somebody that's been apprenticing for so long, they're usually a bit further along than this. And maybe that's why you are still apprenticing after 2 years, because I gotta be honest with you, Joel, this doesn't really look like professional tattoo shop quality. And the more I look at this photo, the more questions I have, because I'm not really sure what's going on in the background either. It almost looks like this is cellophane on top of a table, not real tattoo furniture. And I'm not sure if those dirty paper towels are hanging out on the floor or what. It's just really giving off those at-home tattooer vibes. The lines that you've used for the vines on these flowers are pretty scary. Like if I were a bee, I would be terrified to land on that flower. I doubt the lines, especially the one coming from that red flower, are gonna last very long. It's gonna look pretty scratchy when it's all healed up. If you look at the 2 columns coming off of either side of the yellow gem in the middle, they're just 2 completely different shapes entirely. There's not a lot of symmetry here. The 2 points on the hilt of the sword also look completely different. I mean, again, to be honest, nothing here looks great, and I'm kind of bummed to see a master sword look so bad. The shades of blue and I think that's black are too close to give it any sort of variation. And the same could be said for the green wrap around the handle of the sword. It's just too close to that blue. There's not any kind of contrast. Yeah, again, I don't really know what else to say, because there's just, these lines are all over the place. There's so many inconsistencies here. It's just not a great tattoo. If you truly are an apprentice, I would suggest maybe finding another place to apprentice at, because it doesn't look like you're getting any help here. Because all the things that you're having trouble with seem to be very basic things. Just the outlines alone should be a lot cleaner, and that's the first thing we learn in a proper apprenticeship. Or maybe this is just too big of a tattoo for you to tackle. I would honestly go back and work on those smaller tattoos, similar to the other one you sent in. Because when we look at this one, I mean, it's not bad by any means. It looks like an apprentice tattoo who's learning. These lines are pretty clean for the most part, and in comparison to the lines in the master sword and the lines coming from the flowers, I would think that these were tattooed by 2 different people. And going back to the size of this thing, if you're struggling this much, maybe take it back a few steps and work on something that you know you're capable of. Because I don't want you building these bad habits. It's only gonna hurt you in the long run. Line work, shading, and color choices, these are all things that you should have had down by now. So Joel, don't be afraid to hit the reset button and work on those smaller tattoos, and send me something in the future. I would love to see it. Thank you so much for sending that over. Up next, we've got a few tattoos sent in by Trevor. And Trevor, you've mentioned in your email you've been apprenticing for about a year now and only been on skin for 2 months, twice a week. And I gotta say, I'm really impressed with what you sent over, especially compared to the last tattoo, because these lines are solid. The shades are clean. This is what I would expect out of a proper apprenticeship. And I know I harp on it a lot, but this is why I really appreciate traditional tattoos being taught during the beginning of your apprenticeship, because this is teaching you how to pull clean lines and smooth shades. This is building a good foundation for your future. And with these tattoos, you have immediate feedback, because any small mistake, you'll know exactly where you messed up. And yeah, I know traditional tattoos can be difficult to pull off, but the earlier you get these skills down, it's only going to make it easier in the future, no matter what style you decide to go with. And the first one you sent over is this little spider, and I think that was a great choice. It's not an overly complicated tattoo, and it gives you a chance to reinforce these line pulls over and over and over again, just adding to that muscle memory. And each one of these shapes is pretty damn spot on. And the shades, again, not overly complicated of a process. You've got these nice dark shades whipping out halfway, leaving just the right amount of skin tone. This tattoo is well executed and really shows good control. But let's check out another. This heart and dagger tattoo. Once again, well executed and not overly complicated, leaving a nice result that I'm sure the owner is happy with. I do see a few blowouts here and there, but for only apprenticing for 2 months, it's gonna happen. One thing I really like about this tattoo is the way you shaded the blade. You've got these black shades coming down on the left side and these gray shades coming up on the right, leaving for a nice bevel. It's almost believable. Had you shaded the right side of the blade the way you shaded the left, it would have hidden that middle line and made it look a lot more messy. So good choice there. The red is shaded really well. I don't really see any holidays, and you've got this nice gradient shade to dark red in the back, just keeping it more interesting. The whites on either side of the hilt are probably unnecessary, but not terrible. You've already shown us that you can make things look reflective without using any whites if we look to the center of the hilt, on the handle and on the blade. But since those whites are already there in the hilt, you could have added a nice little white dot at the end of the handle as well, because why not? It just keeps things looking uniform if they are the same material. For only tattooing for 2 months, twice a week, I gotta say I'm impressed. And since you've been apprenticing for a year, it really goes to show me that you've been putting in the work behind the scenes before actually getting on skin. So Trevor, thank you for sharing and keep up the good work. You know, one thing I try to push on apprentices when I meet them in person is aftercare and what they could do to keep their tattoos looking happy and healthy. And nobody does it better than Mad Rabbit. They've got everything a new apprentice could need. From lotions to balms and everything in between, they've got you covered. So head on over to madrabbit.com and be sure to use code PONY20 to save 20% off your entire order. All right, let's get back to it. All right, and the next tattoo sent in is from David Rodriguez, and trigger warning for any epileptics out there. You said this took 8 hours, and I feel so bad for the person receiving it. Because this looks like it hurt. I mean, it hurts me just looking at it. David. I don't know what was going through your head when you made this tattoo. I mean, I don't know what was going on the client's head either, because if I saw this on paper, I would run. Obviously, there's some kind of skull and some fingers holding it and some roses. You're leaving me kind of speechless on this one, David. Youch. At least you've got some line weights. I don't know. I don't know what I'm looking at. Is it melting? Is it just... It almost looks like these flowers are one of those things where you put down a pencil and you can't lift it up for the entire thing. Yikes is right, Ryan. I see this flower at the very top right. It's this little guy up here, and it looks like you double passed it, or maybe it was a fold of a flower. I don't know. It looks like you double passed or triple passed every single one of these lines. I don't know why there's white in the fingernails when the skin tone is already so pale. I think the white isn't really doing anything but make it look more messy. There's little marks here down at the bottom by this group of 3 little flowers. I see lines behind it. I don't know what they're doing there. There's up at the top rows, there's the same thing. There's just random lines that are coming out of nowhere and disappearing into nothing. This is such a strange design. I just don't understand why this person would want this, or maybe things just took a left turn at the last minute. But either way, the lines in this tattoo are just not good. The nose is just kind of floating upwards. It doesn't really look like a hole, but I think that's the least of my worries when I look at this thing. Yeah, I wonder if it took you 8 hours to do this tattoo because you were trying to figure it out along the way, or figure out what exactly you were tattooing. Time to hit the reset button on this one as well. Wipe it from your memory and go back to smaller, simpler designs, because if this is the best one you had to send over, I really question what else you had in your inventory. I'm not trying to be mean here, I'm just being honest. Like, I want to give you some advice to help you out, I just don't know where to start. I mean, because if this is the lines you're putting down, you really got to go back to the very beginning. There's patchiness all over the blacks, there's holidays everywhere. So to me, it just doesn't look like you know how to outline in any way, shape, or form. You don't really know how to pack color. It just seems like you don't know how to use a machine at this point of your career, if this is a career path for you. Again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way. I wonder what you think when you look at this. Does this look like a good tattoo to you? Go back to Trevor's tattoos and look at those. Those are the designs you should be practicing. Something that's achievable in under 8 hours. Yeah, which if we're being honest, this should have taken you nowhere near 8 hours to complete. This, I mean, if I were to attempt it, should have taken no more than 2 hours tops. But that's maybe because you triple passed every line. I don't know. And if these aren't triple pass lines, and if you truly are an apprentice in an actual tattoo shop, it makes me wonder what mentor would approve this design before putting it on skin, because this ain't it. I would suggest using multiple line weights, but I honestly don't think that's going to help with where we're at right here, because if we look at those 2 roses on top, the designs themselves are just so messy and complicated. There's just no separation in anything, and the only type of contrast in this tattoo is that massive black area. So David, my suggestion for you would be to go back to the fundamentals. If you really want to take this serious, go back to smaller palm-sized tattoos, mainly just lines and a little bit of black work, but stay away from anything like this. I mean, not everybody's cut out to be a tattooer, and if it's something you truly want to be, you gotta start taking it more serious. And draw your ass off in your free time. That's only gonna help you. If you're not drawing on your free time, I mean, what are we even doing? Next. All right, the next apprentice who sent in their work for a lashing is Prescott. And Prescott, you mentioned you've been apprenticing for about a year. You tattoo 6 days a week at a busy street shop, and you sent over this rat ink tattoo that you decided to draw on skin first. Now, I can appreciate the initiative to try something like freehanding a tattoo on skin, but when it comes to something like this, I think you would have been better off with a stencil. Everything would have been perfect and set up for a nice tattoo, but I see you changing your mind a lot in the actual design. Those are things that could have been worked out on paper. Like if we look up at the ear, it looks like you started to take the fur one way and then changed your mind last minute and started to take it the other way. It looks like you moved a foot a couple times and even had a different tool altogether in his left hand. These are the things that are just gonna get messy when you start actually applying ink onto the skin. So having a nice clean design on paper is gonna help you out a lot more than you know. Now when it comes to the actual tattoo, not a bad job, not a great job, but somewhere in the middle of the road. I think when it comes to the color choices, you did a great job on that because this does look like rat ink. However, when it comes to the engine at the bottom, I think you just missed the mark. It just seems a bit messy and not very chrome-like. And chrome was a big thing of 90s style tattoos, so you gotta nail that perfectly. Again, just having it on paper first would have set yourself up for success a lot easier. I'm also not a huge fan of the red shading that you have in between the teeth. It just makes it look like his gums are bleeding, which maybe they are, but I think this could have been a lot cleaner. Some black shading would have taken this thing a long way, especially when it comes to the background features, like his left arm and left leg, and even that tail. Remember to tattooify these kinds of images. Beef up those line weights and add some black shading. It'll really strengthen the overall appeal of everything. You do have a couple different line weights here, but they're so close together that it feels pretty minimal and almost the same line weight. And going back to that engine, I think it would have really benefited you to have some nice dark blacks, some good browns, and some nice bright blues, just to really make that chrome effect pop off. Maybe thicken up some of those pipes. Give yourself some room to add that shading, because when you're working in smaller areas, you can only do so much. So Prescott, I'm really on the fence about this one. I do think it should have been stenciled first, but that's just my opinion. Again, you're not committed when it comes to the drawing when it's on paper. You can change it as many times as you want, but since this is a busy street shop, you're likely trying to rush through this drawing when it comes to the actual skin. And that's a situation where nobody wins. But Prescott, I do appreciate you so much for sending that over and allowing me to talk about it. All right, well that's going to wrap it up for the critiques, but I still have to give you my favorite this week. And I'm sure you guys already guessed it, but it's Trevor with these traditional style tattoos. These things are clean, simple, and right to the point. He's already up to a great start when it comes to understanding what it takes to make a solid tattoo. You can really tell that he's likely got great mentors, and that's pretty critical when it comes to an apprenticeship. You need somebody there to guide you in the right direction, and it looks like Trevor's got just that. You can tell he's passionate about this, and he's taking his time, and that clearly shows in his work. So Trevor, keep it up, and congratulations once again on being my favorite this week. All right, one more thing before I let you kids go. You know I gotta give a spotlight to somebody who I think you should all be following, and that's Claudia Denti out of Legnano, Italy. Claudia has some amazing, highly detailed work, and one thing she does extremely well, which we've talked a lot about this episode, is not overcomplicating her designs. She has a strong understanding of how to use various line weights to keep her tattoos interesting. Something we don't see a whole lot of in apprentice submissions are the use of gray wash outlines, and Claudia uses them oh so well. Gray wash outlines can help separate colors, push certain things into the background, and it just gives it a nice overall aesthetic. And I'd be silly not to bring up her extremely bright colors and well-executed watercolor backgrounds, just making these things pop right off the skin. So what are you waiting for? You know what to do. Go give her a follow, like all of her stuff, and let her know I say ya. And remember guys, if you'd like to see your work critiqued on this series, you can send them over to ponycritiques@gmail.com. Don't forget to subscribe, and as always, I will see you guys next week.